So we're going to tear into this carburetor here. This style of carburetor, as you know, it bolts right to the top of the fuel tank here. Now, ordinarily, some clown would have taken this out for us here, but apparently nobody did that for us, so that's just peachy. Let me go get a. Okay, I'm back. So, as I was saying, we're going to take these screws off. Now, ordinarily, a fella doesn't need to do this at all. At all. So, don't if you can help it. The time a person would need to do this is if for some reason you're thinking to yourself, hey, I don't seem to be getting any fuel into the carburetor at all. If that happens to you, then typically it's one of two things, and then you would need to get in here. One, this is a diaphragm style carburetor. That is, as air flows across the diaphragm, just like you when you breathe, right? There's a low pressure, it sucks it up and then pushes down. That is a pumping action that it makes. Okay? The diaphragm can get worn out, can get really tired and brittle, doesn't work as good as it used to. It can actually break and not work at all. Or, of course, you could be getting a bunch of crap in your fuel tank, in which case it can plug up the jets just as easily. So, could be a couple of problems, and if that had to happen, then yes, this is something that a person would need to do eventually. Generally speaking, I do not have kids take these off, because usually when you take them off, you ruin the gasket underneath of them, typically. This is just a junker one, so I'm going to go ahead and tear it up so I can show you kind of how they work. I think I can count on one hand the number of times, definitely on one hand, the number of times I've had to take one of these apart because it wasn't running. Yeah, maybe 5 times, maybe, right? These carburetors are pretty foolproof. As a matter of fact, these carburetors are pretty foolproof to the point where it is rare that they even get plugged up. They just seem to go and go and go compared to the other style. And especially compared to the new style. The new style, ridiculous. Oh, fiddle faddle. Okay, the little end sock piece came off. Now, good news, I think, that I was able to save this gasket. So this is the piece that goes clear down the bottom of the tank. This guy right here, there's a little bit of a screen over it. You can take that out. You can actually blow carb cleaner up through it. That's a nice way of cleaning that piece out. Okay, this goes over this guy here like so to keep you from getting crap into here. This is where the jet comes up. So what happens, okay, this right here is your little diaphragm right there. You can see me pushing on it. You see that? So as the air comes and flows down across, this goes like so, and it creates a suction in here, which then sucks the fuel up from the tank up through here and then deposits it into this little well right here. This little well is kind of like your bowl on a regular style carburetor. And then into there, that's where this little fitting here sits into. And then again, this guy here is your jet that goes up. And if you look in there, will squirt out through that little copper piece, that little brass piece right there on the side. See that? And that is the game, my friend. Now, it is that easy and straightforward. There's not a lot to how these guys work. I would say, you recall, that we need to be vented to the outside world. That hole right there is vented straight up through the carburetor, right through there, back up through the air filter to the outside. You have to have that to create the pressure differential. Okay? So what this is doing, by the way, when you put your gas cap on, there's a pressure difference inside versus outside. When this goes by like this, as the air comes by, it pumps. Remember, as the piston comes up and then goes down, up, down, up, down, up, down, it's not a constant sucking into the engine. It comes and goes. That's why this will come. It'll suck in, this will come up, and then it'll let off, suck in, let off, suck in, let off, and it's pumping fuel up through this guy here. It dumps it into this little reservoir right here, which is where the jet sits, and then it sucks it up, and then it burns it in your carburetor just like usual. Okay? Okay? Now, here is the little primer bulb. Mr. Groom, when I push on this primer bulb, what happens? It's a good question, you see. So let me see if I can get this tore up so you can see inside of it. Okay, that's what she looks like inside. There's a check ball there and a check ball there. What that does is when you push the ball, when you push the air one direction, this ball, one of the balls, when you're pushing, this ball can't go in anymore, so it keeps you from pushing that away. It forces air through that hole there. And when you let out, there's a suction back. This one can't come back, so it plugs this hole off, but this one can go in. Okay? So I'm going to put it back together, and then I'm going to demonstrate what it looks like when we pump it. Apparently, my bulb is messed up a little bit on that one. And so I think I'll demonstrate this again when we get to starting our lawnmowers. So what would normally happen, those two balls, when you push in, it forces fuel through and out into the bottom of the carburetor bit there. Meanwhile, it's sucking from the other one fuel in. And then when you let off the bulb, you push again, it does the same thing. Now, that premise is pretty straightforward, okay? So when you push in, it squirts in, and then when that bulb reinflates, it sucks some more fuel back in and then does it again. Those two check balls allow that to happen only one direction. So what we'll do when we get around to the actual restarting our mowers, I'll make sure that when we get around to restarting our mowers, I'll demonstrate so you can actually see it squirting when we get around to doing that. Okay? So for right now, that's the gist of it. Remember, again, the idea is you've got a straw sitting down into the tank. Okay? There's a little diaphragm. As the air comes surging past the diaphragm, and again, it's so as the air is coming in, it creates a low pressure. We know this. The diaphragm comes up. All right? In the case of coming up, it creates a low pressure. It sucks in, and then it pushes back down, in, out, like this, up and down, creating that pressure, which is pumping the fuel, right, up from the tank into that little bowl, that little reservoir. Now, we don't need a needle and seat for this deal because, all right, our gas sits below the carburetor. We only need a needle and seat if we're pumping gas in with like a real fuel pump, or we're having a gravity fed system, okay, where we could get too much fuel. We do not have that situation this time. And so because our carburetor sits below or above the fuel source, we don't have to worry about it getting too much fuel, or where we need to have a needle and seat situation. Okay? And then once it's inside of there, just like before, as the air blows over the venturi, it sucks fuel up through the jet into the stream, and away you go. That part's exactly the same. And very good carburetor, these little guys. Been using them forever, and they just work.